Hello, brothers and sisters. Today we're going to look at a very interesting topic and one of the most controversial in our church. I have decided to entitle this presentation, First to Feel Stroke of the Wrath of God. So we're looking at the judgment of God in a nutshell. We want to know where the judgment of God will begin from. Of course, Peter mentions that judgment begins at the house of God. But that statement alone is not enough to explain everything that will happen during the course of the judgment. And we know that in the Bible, there have been instances where the Lord has acted after seeing that his people have gone out of hand. If you remember the story of David, at the time David commanded his soldiers to count the people so that he may know how strong the house of Israel was. The Lord was not happy with that. And as a punishment for what he did, he sent an angel to punish David. And we know that the angel came and he started destroying the people. He started killing the people because of the sin that David had committed. It was something that was literal. People were actually dying. It was a pestilence that was sent. And the angel could actually be seen with a sword drawn, and people started falling dead. So when we talk about the stroke of the wrath of God, the people argue that it might be something spiritual. But when you look at a story like the one that I've given, it's actually something that happened. And even during the time the Israelites were about to leave the land of Egypt, we know there was a Passover. And if you look at the term Passover, we know that some people were passed over, some dwellings were passed over, and in some dwellings people were killed. That is, those who did not comply with the conditions that were set by the Lord himself. That they had to put or smear blood at the doorposts. So that was the only thing that was going to save the people. And those who did not comply with that condition, their firstborn children died. In fact, as long as somebody in the family was the firstborn, whether it's the father, it's the mother, it's the child, they died if there was no blood on the doorposts, because that was a condition for their deliverance. So essentially, today's topic is going to review some quotations that talk about a time when God will act to purify his church. And the presentation is emphasizing that these are the same things that are going to happen in future, based on the quotations that I looked at. I know this is going to be very controversial, but we need to understand that we are living at a very difficult time. 1 Timothy chapter 3 talks about the end times as times that will be very difficult when people will not be real. It mentions that people will be lovers of pleasure, they'll be lovers of money, and they'll have a form of godliness, but will deny the power thereof. And I believe we are living in a time described in 1 Timothy chapter 3. We're at a time when we are not real. It's like we want to have both of the two worlds. We are not known where we belong. Nothing actually defines us to say that we belong to this group or to the other camp. So we are told that there'll be purification, and God needs people who are true. There'll be separation between the wheat and the tares, the good fish and the bad fish. And we need to know where the separation will begin from. That is, who will be the first to feel the stroke of the wrath of God. So this will be the major theme of today's presentation. Shall we proceed so that we may see what this lesson is about in details? On the verge of a stupendous crisis. Today, the signs of the times declare that we are standing on the threshold of great and solemn events. Everything in our world is in agitation. Before our eyes is fulfilling the Savior's prophecy of the events to precede his coming. Ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. Nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places. That's Matthew 24, verse 6 and verse 7. The present is a time of overwhelming interest to all living, rulers and statesmen, men who occupy positions of trust and authority, thinking men and women of all classes, have their attention fixed upon the events taking place about us. They are watching the relations that exist among the nations. They observe the intensity that is taking possession of every earthly element. And they recognize that something great and decisive is about to take place, that the world is on the verge of a stupendous crisis. So, from the introduction, you can see that we are living at a very difficult time, and this just sheds more light on what is obtaining at the moment. Of course, there are so many things that are happening, and people are apprehensive and expecting something big about to happen. We know the world is in agitation because things are no longer the same. It's like we've been attacked left, right, and center. So everything that surrounds us, everything that is happening is telling us that we are no longer living in the same world that we used to live in. Because of the occurrences that are everywhere, that are acting more like lights to tell us that something's about to happen, so many people have interest in what's taking place. They want to know just what it is that is about to take place. There's intensity that is taking possession of every element, and people somehow are becoming aware that something great and decisive is about to take place. We are on the verge of a stupendous crisis. So, that is what we need to know as far as the situation we're in is concerned. And it's important that we understand something about what is taking place in that now. And naturally, we normally run to the Bible, to the Word of God, so that we may understand just what are some of the things that the Bible talks about to be signs of the end times. And that is why it's important that we review what the Bible has to say about the end times. Abominations in the holy place. The Lord revealed to Ezekiel in vision some of the things, bad things if anything, abominations, that were being practiced in Jerusalem, and within the gate of the Lord's house, and even in the inner court, the chambers of images, and the picture idols, every form of creeping things, and abominable beasts, and all the idols of the house of Israel. All these, in rapid succession, passed before the astonished gaze of the prophet. So we are given a scenario where the Lord showed the prophet Ezekiel in vision some of the evil things that were practiced in Jerusalem. We know that Jerusalem is actually the city that was dedicated to God because it was the capital of God's nation, the nation of Israel, even at that time. And there were people who expected to live in conformity with the requirements of the Lord. But then, the prophet was amazed after seeing some of the things that were being practiced in Jerusalem, even in the very house of the Lord, in the temple itself. These abominations were actually practiced and they thrived among the people, especially the leadership, because they were actually the ringleaders in the apostasy. Those who should have been spiritual leaders among the people, the ancients of the house of Israel, to the number of 70, were seen offering incense before the idolatrous representations that had been introduced into hidden chambers within the secret precincts of the temple court. So we can see that it's actually the leadership who were the culprits in this spiritual declension. So they are practicing all sorts of abominations within the temple itself. So the people were expected to be leaders, and they were 70. And we know that the number 70 talks about the government of God. So there were 70, if you remember, even Moses chose 70 elders, or 70 people to actually represent the entire congregation. So here we are again given that there were about 70 people were involved in this apostasy. They will introduce certain abominations within the church. The Lord saith us not. The men of Judah flattered themselves as they engaged in their heathenish practices. The Lord hath forsaken the earth, they blasphemously declared. So according to them, the Lord was not seeing them, even as they practiced those abominable things. It's like they assumed that God had taken a leave of some kind. The Lord was no longer there, and they could do as they pleased. So this is how they felt. And they practiced whatever they wanted to practice without any restraint. There were still greater abominations for the prophet to behold. At a gate leading from the outer to the inner court, he was shown women weeping for Tammuz. And within the inner court of the Lord's house, at the door of the temple of the Lord, between the porch and the altar were about 520 men, with their backs toward the temple of the Lord, and their faces toward the east, and worshipped the sun toward the east. So here are other people that were shown to the prophet. The women are involved. They were weeping for Tammuz. And Tammuz was actually a god of the pagans. So God's people, the people who were thought to know the truth, are the ones who were weeping for this idol, Tammuz. And then there were also other people who were found to be worshipping the sun. Okay? They turned their backs towards the temple, and then they were worshipping the sun, or worshipped the sun toward the east. So we can see that this was a very big apostasy according to the way it's painted in Ezekiel chapter 8. So this is the situation that occurred, or that was shown to the prophet in vision. It was actually a vision that was shown to him. So shown everything that was going on in the temple of the Lord. Now we need to understand that this has a meaning, and it has a bearing on the church. Because the nature of prophecy is that it may not necessarily be something that occurred in the time of the prophet. It may be something that was going to happen in our time. We know those people actually apostatized on several occasions, and they departed from the Lord. And each time they did that, they were punished, and then they were brought back when they repented. And we know that at the moment, spiritual Israel are actually those who believe in the Lord. And since this is a prophecy, it has a bearing on what is happening right now to his church. Wicked abominations shown to the prophet. He said furthermore unto me, Son of man, seest thou what they do? Even the great abominations the house of Israel committed here, that I should go far off from my sanctuary. Attend thee yet again, and thou shalt see greater abominations. So I went in and saw, and behold, every form of unclean thing, and abominable beasts, and all the idols of the house of Israel portrayed upon the wall round about. And there stood before them 70 men of the ancients of the house of Israel, with every man his censer in his hand, and a thick cloud of incense went up. Then said he unto me, Son of man, hast thou seen what the ancients of the house of Israel do in the dark? Every man in the chambers of his imagery. For they say, The Lord seeth us not. The Lord hath forsaken the earth. Then he brought me to the door of the gate of the Lord's house, which was toward the north, and behold, there sat women weeping for Tammuz. And he brought me into the inner court of the Lord's house. And behold, at the door of the temple of the Lord, between the porch and the altar, were about 25 men with their backs toward the temple of the Lord, and their faces toward the east, and they worshipped the sun toward the east. Then he said unto me, Hast thou seen this, O son of man? Is it a light thing to the house of Judah that they commit the abominations which they commit here? For they have filled the land with violence, and have returned to provoke me to anger. Therefore will I also deal in fury, mine eye shall not spare, neither will I have pity, and though they cry in mine ears with a loud voice, yet will I not hear them. So this is coming from Ezekiel chapter 8. And we can clearly see what the prophet was shown. How the leadership were the leaders in the apostasy. And they turned the house of God into a temple where they can worship the idols of the heathen, where they can worship the sun, where they can worship Tammuz. The leadership, up to 70 in number, were involved in this apostasy, and there were other 25 who were involved in the worship of the sun toward the east. And if we look at this, we can actually see that what obtained in the vision that the prophet was given is more like what is happening right now. We know the various secret organizations in which God's people are involved for reasons that are known to themselves, for the sake of fame, for the sake of influence or affluence. You find that people are getting involved And I am not just talking about any people, but about people who know the Lord. The people supposed to know better and you're supposed to guide others are the ones who are actually the ringleaders in the apostasy. So we are worshipping idols. And idols may not necessarily be those that are made of wood, stone, metals, or whatever materials one may use. But we're talking in terms of what we think is the most important thing in our lives. The things that come first, our priorities, not necessarily in terms of what we want to do per se. But there are certain things that we think are so important. Like we talk about money. So these things take the place of God, then they become idols. So we're just like the people were shown to the prophet, as far as what we are doing is concerned. So those were the wicked abominations that were shown to the prophet. I'm just giving commentary so that we may have a wider view, even as we talk about the idols that they were involved in. People are still worshipping the sun today. They're involved in all sorts of things that the Bible expressly forbids. So we are in apostasy. We have actually apostatized. So it's important that we review our lives and see how we can come back to the Lord. Now, the Bible does threaten that there are so many things that are going to happen in a bid to purify the church.